Hey guys, we're going to talk today about the rise of Nazism. We've talked about the rise of communism, which really came about during World War I. And so we're going to kind of piggyback onto that because the rise of communism bleeds its way into this lesson as well. Okay. Remember, guys, we're looking at explaining conflict and change in Europe. The newest element we are looking at is explaining the rise of Nazism. We're going to include pre existing prejudices. We're going to talk about how they used propaganda to ultimately get a lot of support for a lot of really bad things that took place. And we're also going to talk about how these things ended up into the turning into the Holocaust. Okay. All right. So basically, guys, Adolf Hitler, all right, born in Austria, and if you'll remember back to like World War One, Austria-Hungary was a very big, excuse me, was a very big dynasty at the time. But as a teenager, just a little older than y'all, they ended up moving him and his family to Munich, Germany. Okay. While he was there, when he was old enough, he did become a soldier, and he did actually fight in World War One. He had a very big sense of nationalism, and if you'll remember, that is extreme pride in one's country. So when Germany did end up losing the war, Hitler was furious. And so this ended up uh, leading him into a long list of things that he wanted to accomplish in order to get Germany back to its once glorious state, is what he believes. Okay. There's just a couple of pictures of him during World War One. Now, remember, because of the Treaty of Versailles, the Allied leaders did not allow Germany to have any input, but they were forced to sign it. So remember, they had to accept blame for World War One. They had to give away a lot of land. They had to take their military and basically take it down to bare bones, just the very minimal. And then, of course, remember they had to pay the war reparations. Okay, not only was Hitler upset, but there were a lot of Germans that were upset over this. Okay. Um, just some pictures of protesters after the Treaty of Versailles. Okay. Now, here's where the reparations hurt Germany the most. In the beginning, after World War One, the Weimar Republic, it was set up, and it was actually set up as a democratic government. And if you'll remember, if it's democratic, that means the people have a say, so they get to vote. Okay. Well, what they did is they wanted to start rebuilding Germany's economy after World War One. Well, because they had to pay over $33 billion, this was really hard. All of this money was getting sent to France and Great Britain, and so all of this money wasn't being used in Germany. It's going to other countries. So Germany's actually unable to rebuild its own economy. On top of that, you do have the stock market crash of 1929, which was felt all around the world, especially in Germany, where they were already feeling issues from not having money. Okay. Excuse me. So here's just a idea. These are unemployment lines. People would stand in line for hours and hours, days on days, and there just was not jobs to get. So once Germany ends up in their into this depression, basically because you don't have certain goods, the price of these goods skyrocket. Okay. It's kind of like when you have really old cars that people like to collect. They're really expensive because there's very few of them. Okay. But during the Depression, guys, food, clothes, basic necessities for people to survive were not available. And then, of course, if you can't find jobs, you can't be paid, you can't buy things. Okay. The value of Germany's money actually inflated, which means it had no value whatsoever. Okay. Basically, what they did is, I mean, they were taking them and making kites out of them. They were actually burning them in their ovens to keep warm because they couldn't buy the coal they needed to keep their fires going. Okay. So ultimately, guys, Germany's money meant nothing. Okay. while all of this was taking place, okay, you had what was called, the people are getting upset. And so the first people they want to blame would be the government, okay? Um, Hitler was also very angry by all of this that he sees going on in his country, okay? So he starts to get his foot in the door with politics. One of the biggest things about Hitler that you can see from many different video clips of him is he is a very powerful but a very persuasive speaker. And that gives him the ability to gain a large following. Okay. So the Nazi Party, which is actually it was called the National Socialist German Workers Party. So this is targeting those middle class people who they have to work but they can't because there's no jobs. Because he is such a persuasive speaker, they actually elect him the leader of the Nazi Party. So in 1923, he feels like they are powerful enough. Well, let's go and try to overthrow the Weimar Republic, which remember is the democratic government at the time. Now, let's think about this, guys. If you're trying to overthrow your government, if you don't succeed, is it going to be very good for you? No, not really. Because what ends up happening is these are just some pictures of the Nazi Party as it's growing. But what happens is it failed. So, since he was the leader, he went to prison. Well, while he was there, he was only in there for 9 months. He wrote Mein Kampf. Okay. This was a book where he outlined his plan basically to save Germany. And so basically, he said, look, we have to expand Germany's lands. We have to get rid of these impure races. And we need to create a German dictatorship so we can truly control this country. Okay. Um, so basically, after he gets out of prison, he continues his work with the Nazi Party. And so, because of his ability to give these passionate and persuasive speeches, the Nazi Party continues to grow after he is out of jail. Okay. Excuse me. That's just a picture of the original Mein Kampf that he had published. Now, here's where things start getting really bad for Germany. When the stock market crashes and this worldwide depression happens, Germany's economy was actually being supported by a lot of loans that were given to them by U.S. banks. So when these U.S. banks needed the money to try to help themselves out from this stock market crash, they turned to Germany and said, all right, you've got to start repaying and you've got to start doing so immediately. Well, Germany's unable to pay. They have no way of gaining any money. They have no way of paying back any of their loans. And so, because of this, more businesses start to fail and more people start losing their job. Now, do you think this gives Hitler and the Nazi Party a little bit more leverage? Pretty much. Okay. Because Hitler sees this. He sees that the Germans are losing respect and losing their belief that the government's going to be able to help them. And so these furious Germans start looking to Hitler and the Nazis for help. Some of the basic things he started promising was that he was going to restore Germany to its once original power, world power. Okay. He wanted to start protecting Germany's people by increasing their military, which would mean that they would increase war materials, guns, ammunition, tanks, things like that. But also, he said that we were going to increase Germany's land. Now, if you think about that, those were all things that the Treaty of Versailles took away from them. So Hitler and Germany are basically looking at turning their backs at the Treaty of Versailles and just saying whatever and doing what they have to do. One of the other key pieces to this is that Hitler was actually able to unite the German people by placing blame or making a scapegoat out of the Jewish population, basically saying that they were the one of the biggest reasons why Germany didn't have the money that they needed to support themselves. Okay. And if you can see in some of these pictures, guys, they're attracting old all the way to the young. Okay. This was an intense nationalism movement at its finest. Okay. So finally, in 1932, after lots of um, speeches, lots of rallies, the Nazi Party is finally able to win the majority vote in an election. When that happened in 1932, they actually appointed Hitler to be the Chancellor of Germany. Basically, he was the man in charge. So once he gained this title, he immediately began changing over from a democratic state to this fascist state where a dictator is going to control everything as well as be controlled by the military. Basically, guys, when Hitler took office, he took total control of the country. When he did this, he immediately banned all opposing political parties, so no one was allowed to speak out against the Nazi Party. And if you did, you were either threatened, you were sent to a concentration camp, or ultimately just done away with and killed. Okay. So ultimately, guys, like I said earlier, Hitler's turning his back on the Treaty of Versailles. Okay. Once he has all the power he needs, he begins violating the terms of the Treaty of Versailles left and right. The first thing by rebuilding the military, the second by reopening factories and building more weapons, building more tanks, things of military grade. He immediately stopped making any reparation payments and he started making plans to take over neighboring lands. How did he do this? Well, in 1938, Hitler annexed, which means he took back part of Austria and then took over parts of Czechoslovakia. Um, Great Britain and France saw this happening, but they didn't want to do anything because they didn't want another world war to break out. Sadly, by them turning a blind eye and not stopping Hitler, Hitler basically starts World War II on September 1st, 1939, when he invades Poland. And therefore, World War II has begun. And that's where we're going to stop today.